because there's not funding behind medical marijuana to do this, but we don't know what exactly propane pulls differently than butane compared to hexane, compared to a lot of these other solvents. Because what we're all agreeing on is that different solvents are going to pull different properties from the cannabis. But what we need to research is exactly what properties. Therefore, we could probably use different solvents to pull different cannabinoids eventually. You know, and things of this nature. But, you know, along those same lines, sorry, I'm blank.
Let me put it this way, has this simple experiment been done? Has anyone ever taken the same plant and then made concentrate with it in all the different ways and then analyze those outputs and see what the differences are between them? You have. So what kind of differences do you get?
Some of them hold like it just holds residual solvent when you get it tested, and that's the problem. You want something you can get all your solvent out of. Some of it like sticks to it, I guess. I don't know exactly how it, that solvent does not clean up as well. Bottom line, you know what I mean? Like the hexane one, I think it was, stayed like real oily almost, like not a little runny maybe. I think it was the hexane one. Yeah, I remember I did so many of them, but one of them stayed real runny, and I was like tripping on it, like, man, why this one stay so runny? But it just didn't want to go do nothing with it, and we did the same one with every other one, and they hardened up real nice and looked real good, but only with that one solvent. So once again, coming back, I mean, people have been doing it for a long time. It's not just us; it's been a long time, and it's been butane for years and years and years. I mean, if we can find something better, cool, but it's pulling everything out. I mean, it's really pulling all the good THCs, all the cannabinoids, because you're following it right from the plant. You get it tested, then you get to test our oil, and the numbers are there. They're where they should be. If they weren't where they should be, I would say, cool, we need to figure out what we're doing wrong. We are, but to do that solvent, I still think that's the best solvent, hands down. I don't know.
I think it is too, but just one thing I wanted to share with the audience, especially with people that are starting to do this for themselves, use dry ice or freeze your cans or do something to make sure that your butane stays as cold as possible. When it's colder, it stays liquid longer, it's more selective, meaning it takes out more good stuff and leaves behind more bad stuff, as in the plant wax and such. So use dry ice right in the tube. What we usually do is we pack a little bit at the top, some dry ice, more material, it's a little bit more dry ice, more material, and then some dry ice on the end. So if you take nothing else like that as far as tips away, like take that, because it'll make it better all around. All around. It should be standard operating procedure for sure.
How are you doing yours? You're just like breaking it up just a little bit, so it's like still rocky, right? You don't want to leave it like super fresh,
it's still rocky. It's still rocky. We get it in pellets from a supply company. We go through about maybe 200 pounds of it a week.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
No, that's cool.
But it's essential. It's essential. You guys really should incorporate that into your technique.
I'm just saying, I don't want people to go in there and get dry ice and then crush it up and then throw it in the bottom, and then, you know what I'm saying? So you need to leave it a little chunky, so that way the fluid can still go through it. You don't want it to freeze all at one spot and have an issue. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, we know these things, we think about these things, just be knowledgeable. Don't do it if you don't know what you're doing, bottom line. You should be doing it if you're not employed. I mean, almost in a way with some kind of dispensary or something like that. It's just not safe for a lot of people to do. If you want to do it, you need to put a lot of money into just your home safety, I guess would be the right way to say it. And I know so many people do it at their home. I used to do it at my home, but it's just not safe. Bottom line, I've seen so many accidents in so many people's houses that it's ridiculous. And, I don't want nobody to have an accident and get hurt. This is to try to help people, not to hurt people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Exactly, but I think all the same people are still going to be doing it at home. And if they are, then
be safe.
Do not do it inside for any reason at all. Make sure you've purged it for a good half an hour before any part of your process comes indoors, please.
Now, you mentioned that with the dry ice you needed to be in chunks, like small chunks. What about the actual plant matter when you guys blast? Do you want trim? Do you want buds? Do you want little nuggets? Do you want it ground up? What is the best way to format the plant material?
I think the future is going to be the actual extract's going to be worth way more than the plant matter. So that's where it's going, but it's not quite economical yet. So we get good trim because I'd much rather have good trim than bad buds.
I agree with him exactly. I think the trim is just what ideal material. If you got somebody who knows how to process their material correctly, they have good material, they cure it right, then you'll get a good product. You got to start with a good product to make a good product. You can't make something bad turn to good. it just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Start with something good and you'll get something good out of it. If it doesn't smell good before you start, it's not going to smell good when you're done. You know what I mean?
How long do you leave the plant material in the solvent? And I know that depends probably on the solvent, like you were saying earlier, but I mean, for butane, it's pretty quick, right? And then
For me, it's minutes. Yeah, it just goes right through the tube, and when it's done, then...
you don't want to let it sit for long periods of time, right? You're saying?
No, it's already in a purging pan.
It pulls out the chlorophyll and other things if it sits too long.
Yeah, and this is the difference that a lot of people are seeing in the closed loop systems versus the open systems, like we mentioned. In the open systems, it's straight through. In a closed loop system, if people aren't operating it properly, they can oftentimes leave the solvent in the material for a lot longer than they like, pulling more plant material, pulling more waxes, chlorophyll, etc.
Exactly. That's why I don't like closed loop systems, and hopefully someone fixes that soon.
Let me also ask you, I'm sure a lot of people out here have tried the different types of concentrates, and sometimes a lot of people I know, even though they may have smoked them, they don't necessarily understand the difference either molecularly or in the technique. If you could help explain the differences between a shatter, a butter, a wax, an oil, like what makes a butter and a shatter a shatter?
It's just how you finish it, really. With shatter, you don't agitate it while you're curing it out. You try not to even pop bubbles. Any kind of agitation will change the color and make it cloudier. So, yeah, that's a big part of it.
There's also a lot of variables in that question. There's a lot of different ways to get your product to butter. There's a lot of different ways to get your product to shatter. So in that question, you have to also take into account the way in which you got there. So with butter, there's so many different ways to get to butter, and there's so much talk right now that butter is a bad product. And I actually wanted to address that really quickly, because even coming from somebody that doesn't work with solvents professionally, I've dealt a lot in them. I've watched the different solvent labs for years, and worked with solvents myself before this company. But you can get butter by leaving too much solvent in your product for too long, and that's called auto buttering. And us here, especially, I think we can agree that that's not a good thing. You want to remove the solvent as fast as possible from that product so that it doesn't keep the solvent trapped in, thus auto buttering. However, I've been noticing a lot of bad talk about butter in general lately, and I just wanted to touch on the fact that if you completely purge your product of all of its solvent, and then you do a process to whip it afterwards, I don't see a harm in it. To me, it's just a different option. It's a different preferred method. There's so many people saying that shatter, since it looks clear, is the only pure form of this solvent-extracted product. And to me, it's just preference at this point. There's so many opinions that people are taking for a fact, and it gets people into trouble. It gets a lot of arguments in the industry and in the community, and a lot of it's just opinion right now because we don't know yet.
Yeah, I've actually had conversations with some people who are very knowledgeable who have said to me that the lipids, the fats, and the waxes that are in there they believe are harmful and that you shouldn't be ingesting them. And they believe that all that needs to be extracted before you have what they call a really pure concentrate. But my argument to them was, and I even said this to you guys, is that moonshine is the purest form of alcohol, but how much of us want to drink that, I mean, we prefer something with a little flavor, with a little character to it, So, even if your shatter is super, super pure cannabinoid, if it has a bad consistency or a bad flavor, or people just don't want to smoke it, I mean, how good of a medicine is it? So, as long as these products are not harming us, and we don't know that if they are or not, probably. I mean, there's no studies, but what is the harm in leaving some of those things in?
I don't think there is any harm. First off, we're smoking way more in our flower. Like I said, I have lung problems. The doctor's like, oh, you're not smoking that flower. Look at how much better you're breathing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but long story short of that is you're smoking all the same things already, okay? It's concentrated more. Yes, it is. It is concentrated more because we're breaking it down. But if you smoke one joint to one dab, then it's the same amount almost. You know what I mean? You're probably smoking way less. I mean, obviously you're not smoking the chlorophyll. You're not smoking none of the leaf, none of the other stuff that's burning. You're not smoking none of that. You're not smoking the paper that you're usually rolling it in. But I like flowers. Don't get me wrong. I usually smoke them out of a water pipe though. But it's just
another comparison that you're mentioning, because we're talking about a few different things here, is you're actually talking about a product that's washed of all its waxes. Oftentimes you can have a butter and a shatter, but that aren't washed of their waxes. They both contain waxes, even the shatter. But what you're mentioning is getting rid of the terpenes specifically, and a lot of other things that go along with a wash. And what we don't know yet is the actual effect of the terpenoids on us, because we're doing all this study about all the cannabinoids having an effect, but in reality, the terpenoids actually have a large effect in the effect of the cannabinoids.
And they contain the aroma and flavor for the most part, don't they? I mean,
which adds to the effect.
So you're losing a lot of the aroma and the flavor by extracting the terpenoids.
Yeah,
with the wash.
Putting alcohol wash. Yeah, usually it's an alcohol wash that they're using. And the thing with that is, I see there's like a lot of sugar and stuff that's left over, like on the nail even. Like there's residual on all the nail, like almost 90%. I have tried one that I'd say was really good. One, you understand, one, and I've tried a lot. And I tried one wash that was really good, came out of Colorado.
I don't believe in winterizing either. I think you lose too much, and I definitely believe there is a medicinal effect to the aromatics of marijuana. I definitely do. It's not the same without it. And I have to admit, honestly though, the stuff, we have a really skilled person making this stuff in Colorado, and the stuff of his that I tried was much easier on the lungs. It was easy to take a big dab of it. It did leave behind burnt sugar though. So I don't know what the effects are of that. But, yeah.
Well, the burnt sugar is actually coming from, most of the time people are using Everclear to do their washes, which is a 95% alcohol. And that 5% is water and sugar that's left behind. So if we can find a solvent to use to do a better wash, I wouldn't have too much of a problem with it. And now this is once again something to recognize that these are opinions, I think that some patients are going to prefer to have the smoother intake without the terpenoid profile, and I think some patients are going to prefer to have the profile that has all the terpenoids that gives them that happier effect.
I'd like to take just a half a step back from this discussion where we're having right now, and just for the people that don't know, or I don't know, there may be some people out there that are getting a little lost, let's talk about purging and washing and what they are and what your methods for doing them are, so that people are all up to speed and they understand what it is we're talking about.
Just very simply, I do probably what most of the people in here do. I blast into a dish that is floating in hot water, so it begins purging immediately. I change out the hot water a couple times, and from there I take it into a vacuum oven, and that's how I purge the final parts of it out.
What type of temperature do you need to keep it at for the butane to purge out?
Because it's a vacuum oven, I go a little bit higher than I would if it was direct heat, because this is like on racks radiant heat, so I can go up to 140 at the absolute most and get really good results.
You guys, what are your techniques?
Well, with purging and washing, they're completely different things. A purge is actually taking the solvent out of your product. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about purging. For me personally, I don't have to purge. I'm not using any solvents.
Right.
But I'd say that the preferred method of purge is definitely using hot water, because it's an even heat, along with a vacuum. But what I've seen in Colorado, especially with our altitude, is you do need a vacuum oven to completely remove all the solvents. I have seen quite a few people attempt to remove all of the solvents just using a heat method, and it's difficult in the altitude. So just to be completely safe, I personally prefer seeing it heated and using a vac oven. And now when I say heated, I definitely don't like to go above those certain temperatures, and different strains are gonna contain different temperatures where they're gonna start losing terpenes. So certain strains I don't want to bring anywhere above 100 degrees, whereas certain strains I feel like we can bring to 140.
Well, just to be clear, it doesn't go above 120 in my pan when the oven's set at 140. Just to be totally clear about that. But one thing that I just wanted to say is there's an old school tech most of us all learned from this guy who's an internet personality from Canada named Hashmaster Cut. And the way he said to do it was to run like half a tube at a time, something really small, and then you'd be able to heat purge it. But if you're doing anything more than a few grams, you just can't get clean shatter without, a vacuum oven.
Exactly.
I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, you have to vacuum it at that point. There's just way too much material to go through. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you can't heat it. You cannot duplicate what they can do. You know what I mean? By hand, we cannot do what they do. They pull out so much stuff that by hand we'd never be able to pull out by just heating it, by just leaving it in the sun, by whatever the method is. The vac and the vac ovens just kill it. You know what I mean?
And I think I was definitely referring to a commercial level, so I was definitely referring to larger amounts.
So if purging is pulling the solvent out, and we all understand that, then what is the purpose of the wash? What does the wash do, and why would you need it?
Well, the purpose of the wash is, let's say you get some bad wax. The plant waxes that you extracted when you did your thing are probably holding on to some residual solvent. So what you do is you dissolve it in, let's say, Everclear or lab-grade ISO or something. You dissolve it in there, you freeze it, get it really cold, you filter it like through coffee filters, and then you evaporate the alcohol that's left over, and what you have is something really clean, but like we were saying, still has some residual sugars left behind. We don't really know what
Still
that is.
hurts my throat.
Yeah, still
Still hurts my
I can
throat.
still taste the alcohol.
Yeah,
every time.
exactly.
So then you're actually incorporating a second solvent into the process, which is
But
what
that's
the
where
wash
the dry
is.
ice comes in and keeps everything cold and pulls out a lot less. Not 100%, of course, but a lot less plant waxes. You get a lot less out of it. So if you are trying to go for just a straight shatter and you want to do that, cool. I don't think there's any problem with it. I mean, if some people want it out, I'll take it out. It's not a big deal. But I mean, I use dry ice all the time now, so it's not really true because I still get the same product. But it's not bad either way, I don't think, as far as my opinion is. I mean, if you want it done that way, cool, then do it that way. But do I want it done that way? No, it's cool, whatever. You know what I mean?
And I think this is one of the important things to remember is that these things are different.
Hey, more for shatter though. For the plant waxes, if you don't want clear shatter, you don't want it to auto butter. See, auto buttering is a couple things though. Nick's right. If you do have solvent in there, it can bubble out per se like that, like what some people think is auto butter. But auto butter can just be you getting it a little warm in your pocket and it taking and pulling those waxes that are in there out, or like making them like butter up basically. And they sort of like, and then they like it just all turns like a sugar, would be the best way to say it, right?
Yeah, but this is also one of the things to mention about using the washes is all of us have tried a lot of really high quality hash from people that are saying that they wash it extremely professional. Some of the professionals in our industry that we're hearing about, and we're not completely satisfied with this wash. So even if a wash is eventually going to be more healthy for us, we need to find a better solvent to use for this wash.
For the wash, correct.
If we're
yes.
complaining about using two separate solvents,
They haven't
and
checked that much.
oftentimes people are tasting the alcohol after they've done the wash or seeing the sugars left behind, we need to use a different solvent. End of
Correct.
story.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And what is the winterization process? Because I've heard that word used a lot.
They freeze it, that's why. They consider it winterizing it, because it freezes
It's
it.
frozen at one point in the process.
The washing process.
After washing. It's
No,
frozen.
during the washing
It
process,
pulls
they're
it out,
keeping
like-
everything cold as possible.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
the washing process is synonymous with winterization as long as you're doing it properly.
Great. Okay. Just trying to clarify terms for everybody. All right. So now let's say you've got your good product. You blast it correctly. You're using good materials. You're purging it, possibly washing it. You got your wash. Now, how long would you wash it? And you're saying temperature-wise, it would be very cold.
What do you mean, as far as like, what you're talking about is washing it or just cleaning our solvents out?
He's talking about washing it, and you could do it up to 24 hours if it's just soaking in alcohol, dissolved. And what happens is the wax will just precipitate out of it and separate after a while.
It sits on top, basically.
However, the longer you have your product sitting in solvent, if you're not retaining an extremely cold temperature, you're going to start to pull more chlorophyll, more stuff that you're not going to want, using that second solvent.
Of course.
I think at this point it's the actual extract already removed from all that stuff in the solvent. So like at that point it's just separating the cannabinoids from waxes and stuff.
Then what I guess I meant to say is if you leave your product in that solvent, it's going to be a lot harder to remove the solvent, and maybe that's why you're tasting a little bit of alcohol in the end product.
Yeah, honestly, I just haven't been impressed with it. So the few experiments that I did didn't really lead anywhere. And in fact, the person who I learned how to do this from, I taught him how to make butter, and he just makes butter now.
Yeah, it works like that.
So obviously the biggest concern with all these products, regardless of how they're made, is quality control, is making sure that however you do it, you're doing it right and that you're getting a quality product. I was curious to hear from you guys about, now that there's a preponderance of cannabis labs out there that are like testing flowers and testing different cannabis products, edibles and whatnot, are these concentrates that are being made, are they being tested by the labs? Is there data now that's coming back from these labs that says how, well, we have potency, that's always there. I mean, any lab analysis, they give you the potency, but more than the potency, we need to know, is there
out there.
solvent left
Yeah.
in it? Is there contaminants
They have
in it?
there's like 3 or 4 labs that'll do that. They'll test for your solvents, and they'll check to see if there's any solvent left in there. You can test for anything.
Also pesticides or molds or any other contaminants that may have gotten in during
yeah.
the process.
And the thing is, like, the biggest thing with the labs is they need to get like an all-around calibration level. There you go. They need to be all calibrated on the same level, because you need to be able to send it to every. I mean, I test my labs. You know, here I send the same sample to all 4 labs and see which one comes back different. And the last test I did, only one came back like way different, but like 20% different. The other 3 were literally within points of each other. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, it's one lab and they're like, oh, we just calibrated our thing. And I'm like, okay, so what, the other 3 are out of calibration? Where's your level? They need to have a baseline level that they can share with amongst each other. But half the labs are battling and want to be the lab, you know what I mean? That everybody's testing with.
And also another thing to remember is that any like small amounts of residual solvent are usually consumed in the testing process, so they're not going to show up in the results.
The gas head test where they check it and then burn it and then check what's in the air and all that. Yeah, I mean it can find it, because like we've done it and there was some in one that we did and there was like very little in the other. But there is tests out there. They can test for it. Is everybody testing it? Hell no. I mean, it's seriously, like half the people don't. Nobody that's doing it at their house is testing it, and half the people that are still have it in their shops aren't testing it. You know what I mean?
Well, what can we do as consumers of this, as medical patients, and as people who are, you know, distributing this? What can we do to try to set up, to try to encourage, let's say, a more standardized lab system, or just more accurate results and more widespread testing? What power do we have to enable that to happen?
I think we just have to talk to the patients, and the patients have to continue to speak to their centers about pushing testing. But, you know, one of the other issues is that you mentioned that your labs here in Southern California test for solvents. I don't think any of our labs in Colorado test for solvents. I don't think anywhere else throughout the U.S.
Seattle does.
is testing for solvents.
Seattle has some. San Francisco has some.
And then the other issue I see with testing for solvents is, as soon as a company tests with a lab where they pay more to test for that solvent, and they get a result back that says, yes, their product has solvent in it, are they going to use that test result to market their product? No.
Obviously
Therefore,
not.
are they going to use that test again? Are they going to ever use that company to test for solvents again?
Well, you
no.
should. No, you should. What, you want them to lie to you?
I
well,
don't.
If that's
I
what
don't
you want,
personally.
but know what I mean? Like,
But that's what I
shouldn't lie to
saw
you.
happen in Colorado. There was one lab that started testing for solvents and mildew. We noticed that they were charging a higher price when companies would test for that, you know, using that lab and see products come back with mold or solvent left behind. They stopped testing.
Then they have an issue.
That's what I personally talk to lab owners about, and that's why they stopped doing that in Colorado.
Yeah,
and it's sad. It
seems like there needs to be some type of Freedom of Information Act regarding medicine, where, like, if you're going to be taking something, you should have a right to know what's in it. The same way when we buy food, there's, you know, ingredients on the label and
once again, it's the
nutrition
patients.
breakdown.
They just don't need it. They just shouldn't go into any shop and just run in and grab oil. Bottom line, you should go to a shop where you know they have quality medication, where you can find out where it came from. You go in there and the guy's like, I don't know who made it. One of the guys in the back or blah, 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 blah. You probably shouldn't buy that stuff. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that because 90% of the places have that. But you need to go someplace maybe where you knew the owner, or you know somebody who goes there and they can bring you quality medication. You can just see it for yourself in 90% of the time.
Yeah,
or
obey your senses. Because
Yeah.
every time it smells bad, looks bad,
Then
tastes
don't get
bad,
it.
like it's bad.
I don't care how good they say it is, don't get it.
And if it sizzles at all, it's no good, right?
That's not 100% true, but yes, it's 90% true.
And this is where a lot of the opinion comes in, is because oftentimes people think that butter is bad, you know? Yet Daniel Desai's just mentioned that if it looks bad, it's bad. So what is bad? You know, because
Bad
a
is
lot of you
anything
guys
with
out
residual
there
solvent.
don't know, 95% of the people in our community of patients don't know what's good from bad. And a lot of it's opinion right now.
It should taste like it smells. If it
That's where the
smells
labs
good, you
come
want to
in. The
smoke
labs
it.
would
If it
take the
doesn't smell
opinion
good,
out
you
of
don't
it.
want to smoke
If
it.
it's light colored, if it smells good, it's probably good. If it's like
Exactly.
if it looks like a pool of motor oil, then it's probably bad.
I guess this is where my train of thought comes into play. I don't use solvents. So our product always looks the same because there's no solvents in it. We don't have to worry about removing excess solvents.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Nika.
Sorry, I had to mention the solvents.
no,
We've
let's-
been talking about solvents this whole time.
Absolutely,
so
no,
I had to
absolutely.
bring it
Let's talk about that for a minute because you don't use solvents, but your products come in pretty close to the solvent stuff, right? I mean,
I just hit an 83% from Cannabis, and I think it hit over 60% CBD
wow.
from water hash, sour tsunami, and OG18. Yeah.
So so the advantage to doing solventless, I guess, would be pretty obvious, which is that you don't have to worry about these other materials. What's the downside? It's more time consuming, right?
It's definitely, it can be more time consuming. Oftentimes it can be a lot more of an artistic process compared to a chemical process. We take into account a lot more variables. We'll run different material completely differently. So in actuality it's a lot more difficult to do the solventless method, especially the way that we do it. And then, the other train of thought is going to say, there's mold concerns, which there are mold concerns in using water. And that's why we really preach teaching people to process using water properly, to completely spread out your material after you've processed it, to dry it in open air, to use a microplane or a sieve to completely break it down. We don't leave any of our hash in clumps whatsoever. And there's certain precautions to take, just like there are with solvent extractions, to keep these negative things out of our products.
I've actually heard of one solvent maker who we know who actually adds water to the extract in order to whip it or something.
I think you're referring to one of our friends who actually blasts his butane extract into warm water and then he collects it afterwards,
Right,
correct?
yeah.
Yeah, there's a few people with that train of thought. That's still not using the water as a solvent. It's still using butane as a solvent. That's just a purging method.
Gotcha.
That would be one that would sizzle. You talk about something that would sizzle.
What would be the effect? What would be the effect on the concentrate of doing that?
I don't know. Some people say it makes it a little lighter when they whip it with the water in it and this, that, and the other. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. You can do whatever you want.
I think oftentimes people say that it also retains a little bit more terpenes doing it that way because you're instantly purging. But yes, there's obviously.
See, mine. I mean, I'm not saying nothing, but mine does not lose terpenes. I do not do it in the water. But the thing is that you get moisture in your lungs and stuff. Like I said, once again, lung issues.
So it retains, it retains some of that water.
Yeah,
and then
retains some of that water. Go get it tested.
You can't remove that water completely. That's where the issue.
I get my test done for all my solvents left in there. It comes back with like how much moisture content and all the other stuff was in there. And like I'm zero. When I have a perfect batch, it's 0. Like it won't be 0. It's always got like a little number right there. But like it's thousands, whatever, 10,000, whatever it is. It's way back over in the corner. They also test for the moisture that's in there, the solvent, any solvent, residual solvent that's in there, and like 0% water even in there. You know what I mean? Once it dries, it should dry. And like the only difference between like the shatter and the butter, there is no real main difference. The biggest difference is when you're starting to whip it, you put oxygen in there, you're like oxygenating it, foaming it up almost to a sort. And when that happens, it in my eyes, it does keep a lot of the flavor and the terpenes in there a little bit more than the shatter does. But I don't know if it's because I don't know, whatever. I mean, but the shatter still tastes good too. I mean, if you do good shatter, it tastes good. It should still smell like it would if you made butter. You know what I mean? The shatter to me though has like a little bit of harshness on my throat for some reason. Don't know what it is, why. And they have proven by whipping it, you do keep more wax. Wait, is it? I'm trying to remember. I know for sure it keeps more of the terpenes and more wax. I want to say it keeps more wax or something like that.
It's also argued that with butter, it tends to degrade faster, so you have less of a smoking window.
Well, I agree.
Whereas shatter will just trap in all the flavor.
Okay, I agree.
When you smell it in the container, it might not have as much smell, but it'll still have a lot of flavor when you hit it.
Yeah, I agree on that. I mean, my butter, like, so if I have butter, like I have some with me right now that I had for like already like a month, a little over a month. And so what happens is THC oxidizes, whether it's on a plant or whether it's in oil. It's still THC, and it oxidizes no matter what. So mine, like, some will turn brown. I think we were just talking about, some will turn like a reddish color. Some will turn a green color. Like Paris and Hardcore, always green. Like, and it's weird. See, so it starts collecting from what I'm thinking it is. So it's dry. It's 0% moisture. It's like a sponge. You start leaving it out, and you have humidity in the air. It's going to start sucking up like a sponge. You're going to get moisture inside of your butter quicker than you would on your shatter. I mean, your shatter's not going to suck it up like that because it's not a sponge.
I think our techniques are a little different. Mine just tends to stay, dry. It gets drier.
On mine, it just ends up eventually doing that. If it doesn't stay it stays at a warm temperature and open to the air a lot. If it's kept in a sealed container in any environment, it stays perfect. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I wanted to talk about too is just, I do consider what I do more art than chemistry. I learned this as a craft. Someone taught me, and from there, from the base they gave me, I expanded from there, and I've taught a lot of other people. I really do consider it an art. The way I run my